welcome to day 2 of Romans chapter 13. I'd like to just dig right in today. We are at verse 5. Let's read. This is a short passage and kind of a wrap up from yesterday. Therefore, one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them. Taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed. All right, so we have the very first word, therefore, which links this passage to yesterday's passage, right? So we need to keep in mind, all right, where were we yesterday? What did Paul teach us yesterday? Well, basically, we wrapped up with this idea, let every person be subject to the governing authorities. And we asked yesterday that why question, and Paul gave us 2 good reasons. Number 1, because God has assigned them to their positions of rank. And number 2, because they bear the sword. As servants of God, they bear the sword to keep law and order in their various kingdoms. All right, so today we have therefore, and verse 5. Doesn't verse 5 sound just like verse 1 yesterday? Yes, it does. Therefore, one must be in subjection, which means the exact same thing that we unpacked yesterday. Remember, subjection is to be submissive, to be inclined, to be willing to submit to orders, be willing to submit to orders or the wishes of another, or at least showing such an inclination. There's actually a couple of interesting cross-references. Number 1, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 19. Peter says this, "For this is a gracious thing." All right, when we hear a gracious thing, we think this is a gift from God. "When, mindful of God, one endures sorrow while suffering unjustly." Okay, that's kind of interesting for those who are under governing authorities that do not seem just. Peter gives us some hope that in some way God is working this out for good, and it's a gracious thing. Ecclesiastes 8:2, "I say," this is Solomon speaking, "keep the king's command because of God's oath to him." All right, so we kind of land in this same place of, wow, yeah, all right, maybe I shouldn't go to application just yet. Let's go ahead and continue unpacking this. So far, if we look at yesterday, Paul has given us 2 good reasons why one must be in subjection to the governing authorities. 1, because God has assigned them to their position of rank. Number 2, because they bear the sword, right, to keep law and order. And here in verse 5, basically he said this yesterday, but I like how black and white and simple it is here in verse 5. He says, to avoid God's wrath, to avoid God's punishment. Through the governing authority. And then number 4, this is also found in verse 5, but also for the sake of conscience. For the sake of conscience. That's a word I dropped in my keyword column and defined. Here's what my Bible dictionary has to say. The psychological faculty that distinguishes between right and wrong. And friends, get this. It either afflicts, all right, conscience either afflicts or comforts a person depending on their actions. So I like that. That caught my attention. Conscience either afflicts if we've done wrong, or it comforts if we've done right. Why does it comfort? Because we know we're safe. This goes along with what Paul said yesterday, the other imperative command, do good. This has to do with conscience, clearly doing what is right versus what is wrong. And then what do we have? We have peace of mind, peace in our hearts. We have harmony within. All right, so those are all the reasons Paul has said to be subject to the governing authorities. But he also goes on then in verse 6. He says, "For because of this, you also pay taxes." You also pay taxes. Friends, what are taxes? All right, I thought I knew the answer to this, but it's interesting. Taxes here is the same word as tribute. All right, tribute. Payment from one nation to another for protection and to acknowledge, and as an acknowledgement of protection. All right, so yes, it is something that we owe. It is something that we owe to the governing authorities. And it goes back to, it links to, the definition links to those covenant agreements of the Old Testament, where one nation pays tribute to another nation. Only that's not what's happening here. It's members or citizens of a country are paying taxes, paying this tribute for the protection that the government supplies and for the other services that the governing authorities supply. All right? Interesting, huh? So Paul makes it abundantly clear. Here's another imperative command in verse 7 that's clearly an imperative. Pay to all what is owed to them. And he gives us a list of things that we are to pay, that we owe to the governing authorities, and sometimes we owe to others. Pay to all what is owed to them. Number 1, pay your taxes. Number 2, pay your revenue. Number 3, pay your respect. Number 4, pay your honor. I wondered if there was any difference between respect and honor. Not really. The definition for respect was reverence, fear, a certain amount of awe of the governing authorities, and honor is highly respected or revered. All right, main point here, friends, I think is really, really simple. One must be in subjection to the governing authorities and pay taxes. Paid everything that is owed to the governing authorities. Why? Because they are ministers of God. They are God's servants. Application. I was like, okay, Lord, take a look at my heart. Where am I with this? And, as I sat and thought about it, I thought, okay, clearly the authorities are servants. They're ministers of God. Can I trust them? Can I trust the politicians in my country? I mean, here we are. We are in my own country, we are in election. I mean, this is prime time election time. The elections are coming up in a few weeks. Can we trust the politicians, or can I trust the politicians in my country? And I just said flat out, no. No, there's so much deceit within the whole political realm. But can I trust God? Can I trust God? Yes, yes, and yes. And that brings me comfort as we head into this upcoming election. And then I began to pray about this, friends, and I just realized that, I haven't had the right attitude towards the governing authorities. It's easy to become cynical. It's easy to just grumble and complain and have this overall disrespectful attitude. So I think it shows something about my own broken heart if I become cynical or disrespectful in some way. There is no perfect government. Before I had a few years back, I lived in China, not a perfect government. I am a citizen of the United States and have been back here for quite a number of years now, not a perfect government. It's easy after so many years to become cynical, to become disrespectful in attitude. But friends, who am I ultimately disrespecting or dishonoring? Ultimately, I'm disrespecting my God. So I had to seek his forgiveness in that way today and ask him to unite my heart with his heart. Help me to honor, help me to respect those who maybe haven't, who maybe are always living or governing in a respectful or honoring way. But my call, friends, my call from God is to show honor and respect. Pay my taxes, pay all that is due. Remember, we saw last week in Romans chapter 12, honor. This was Romans 12:10. I jotted this down. It came to mind during the prayer time. Love one another, outdo one another in showing honor. Be the first, lead the way in showing honor. Oh, friends, as followers of Christ, especially as we go into this election season, may we be the first to show honor and respect to our governing authorities.